Welcome to Paskvan Podcasts. Please like, subscribe, and comment. It really helps this channel. Today, we are going into a case from 1967 deep in the Canadian wilderness. And this isn't just a story about some blurry lights in the sky. Not at all. This is an inquiry into an event where the unexplained didn't just, leave an impression. It left actual physical scars.
Tangible scars.
Exactly. So what we're really asking today is, what happens when a mystery crosses that boundary? When it becomes matter?
This case is really the ultimate collision of the bizarre and the bureaucratic. I mean, when you have an event that forces government agencies to open these thick files and then they just can't close them, that's the story of Stefan Wikelak.
His credibility is everything here. It's the foundation of this whole story.
It really is, because the man himself was just the total opposite of a sensationalist. He was grounded.
He wasn't out there looking for drama. He was a successful industrial mechanic, an amateur geologist. I mean, this is a man who lived his life by precision, by measurements.
And he was just out there looking for quartz deposits. That was his hobby.
So the fact that this meticulous, disciplined professional becomes the central witness, it just makes the documented injury and the official confusion that followed so much more compelling.
Right. To really get this, you have to picture the location. We're talking about Falcon Lake, Manitoba, back in May of 1967.
And this is deep inside the Canadian Shield.
Yeah, and if you haven't been there, just try to imagine this colossal, ancient expanse of granite rock. It's basically the geological core of North America.
It's a landscape defined by its age, really. And it's unforgiving. The glacier scraped almost everything away thousands of years ago, leaving this exposed granite, these dense forests, and a silence that feels heavy.
That isolation is so important to the story. Back then, there were very few roads, towns were far apart, and the second you set off the main highway, the wilderness just swallowed you up.
The quiet is different out there, isn't it?
It's deliberate. It feels like every sound carries. A branch snapping, a bird call. It just echoes. And for anyone who wasn't experienced, that land is, frankly, hostile. But Wikelak wasn't an outsider. He knew what he was doing.
And that's such a perfect counterpoint to what's about to happen. Stefan Wikelak, a highly skilled metal worker in Winnipeg.
Methodical, disciplined. He'd emigrated from Poland and built this very precise life for himself in Canada. He understood metal, he understood heat, he understood complex machinery.
So prospecting wasn't just a walk in the woods for him.
No, it was his solitary, precise hobby. He went out alone to apply this rigorous, methodical approach to geology, tapping rocks, taking careful notes. He was looking for mineral traces. This was not a man given to flights of fancy. He was grounded in engineering.
So May 20th, 1967. The day starts completely normally.
Perfect weather. Mild, clear. Ideal for being outdoors. He's miles north of the main lake, completely focused on this one area where he thinks he might find quartz.
It's late morning. He's working away on a rocky clearing.
And then the silence breaks. He hears a sound. And at first, it's faint, it's distant. You could easily dismiss it. Maybe a flock of geese. But the more he listens, the more he realizes that's not right.
If he had a mechanic's ear, right, he's spent his whole life around engines and machinery.
Exactly. He registered an inconsistency, the sound. It had a mechanical rhythm to it, but it was uneven, repetitive. It was an engineered noise, a piece of technology operating, and it just did not belong out there in that ancient, quiet place.
Intrusion.
A total intrusion. And it was getting steadily louder, more pronounced. So he puts down his tools, his rock samples, and his hammer, and he stands up to try and figure out where this mechanical sound is coming from.
He looks up, and what he sees just immediately changes everything. This isn't just a sound anomaly anymore.
No. Yeah. He describes seeing two objects coming down from the sky, elongated, sort of cigar or oval-shaped, and metallic.
And there was a glow.
Yes, a faint red glow around their edges. That's a crucial detail.
And what stood out to him was the way they moved.
The control. That was the defining detail for him. They weren't fluttering or tumbling or being pushed by the wind. They moved with a precision that it contradicted everything he knew about aviation at the time.
They slowed down as they got closer to the clearing, but not like a normal aircraft would.
No jet roar, no audible displacement of air that you'd associate with any known aircraft in 1967. It was almost silent.
The reports mentioned a synchronized maneuver, too.
Yes. They adjusted their position relative to one another with what seemed like, effortless control. Mm-hmm. And then one of the objects, it just tilted slightly.
Like a gesture.
Almost, yeah. It tilted, accelerated smoothly, and just vanished into the sky. Instantly. The speed and the silence of that movement was shocking.
But the second one kept coming down. right towards the rocky outcrop where he was standing.
And this is where his industrial mind kicks in. He's trying to rationalize what he's seeing.
Of course. You have to remember the context. It's 1967, the middle of the Cold War.
Military aviation was progressing at a terrifying rate, and most of it was secret. So his mind immediately goes to an experimental aircraft, maybe American, maybe Soviet, that's had some kind of malfunction.
His first thought is that the people inside might be hurt.
Right, or that they don't know he's there, or that it's all top secret. That rational framework is so important because it explains why he didn't just turn and run for his life.
He felt he had to check for survivors, maybe offer help.
So he watches as this thing slows down even more. It doesn't actually land. It hovers just above the rock surface.
And as it gets closer, he feels something.
Intense heat, palpable heat radiating out from it, warming his face from dozens of feet away. And there was this low-frequency vibration that intensified, and he could feel it coming up through the granite, through the soles of his boots, and into his body.
The way it landed. It's so specific. It didn't crash. It didn't kick up dust or move the leaves on the trees.
Which would suggest a propulsion system that doesn't rely on downward thrust. No anti-gravity or something fundamentally different. It just came to rest gently, maybe a foot or two above the ground, before settling a bit closer.
No blast of air, no crash.
No debris movement at all. Just this sustained, powerful humming sound and that intense heat. The complete lack of normal aerodynamic effects. It strongly implied a technology unlike anything that was publicly known.
So at this point, this man who lives by the laws of physics is face to face with an object that seems to be breaking all of them, and yet he still walks towards it.
Driven by curiosity and that initial idea that this was just a downed secret aircraft, he approaches cautiously, slowly, keeping his hands visible to show he means no harm.
And being this close lets him see the details.
Crucial details. The surface of this thing was utterly smooth. He described it as a seamless metallic shell. Almost polished.
Now, as an industrial mechanic, he would have been looking for the seams, right? The rivets, the weld marks. Those are standard on any manufactured object, especially a vehicle built to hold pressure.
And he saw none. The complete absence of any of those features suggested a level of manufacturing that was, well, far beyond 1960s tech. Maybe monolithic, cast as a single piece.
And the sensory input just gets stronger.
The humming intensifies to the point where he can feel it vibrating deep inside his chest. It's physically uncomfortable, and the air around the craft has this bizarre smell.
Sulfur.
A sulfur-like electrical acrid stench, like overheated machinery or burning circuits that have been pushed way too far.
And while he's taking all this in, looking at this flawless exterior, something happens.
A rectangular hatch or an opening just appears on the side, and it glows with this intense white light that spills out onto the granite.
The light was so bright he couldn't see inside clear.
It was too fierce. He could only make out vague, shifting shapes moving around behind that wall of brightness.
But he's still operating under his initial theory. Injured foreign pilots.
So he tries to communicate. He yells out in English, then Polish, then Russian and German. He's just instinctively cycling through every language he knows, trying to bridge this gap.
And the response?
Total silence. Nothing. No distress call, no acknowledgement. Nothing you'd expect from a human crew, no matter how secret their mission was.
That silence must have been the first moment of real dread.
But then the encounter takes another radical turn. He leans in a little closer, trying to see past that blinding light.
And he hears something.
He hears muffled sounds from inside the craft. He was certain they were voices, people communicating in a language he had never, ever heard before.
And this is the chilling part, the really crucial detail.
The voices weren't panicked. They were described as calm, controlled, measured. They weren't shouting or reacting to an emergency. They were communicating with the assurance of a crew that was fully operational.
And fully aware that he was standing right there.
Absolutely. That detail just overturns the whole military crash theory. If this were a secret plane and they had just made an emergency landing in front of a civilian, there would be alarms, shouting, some kind of reaction to his calls.
But the calmness suggests they were just following their own protocol.
A protocol that involved observing him, but not interacting with him. He approached a machine expecting some kind of human response, or at least a human-like emergency. Instead, he found an enigma, a flawlessly engineered vessel occupied by beings speaking an unknown language, acting with total confidence and control. The lack of panic showed that they were in charge of the situation. He was just an intrusion.
That moment, finding those calm, unknown voices, that must have triggered a basic instinct to just get away.
And it seems the object responded to that instantly. It sensed that the observational part of this encounter was over.
The shift from curiosity to catastrophe was immediate and violent.
The rectangular hatch slammed shut. It made this deafening final sound, and that low humming he'd been feeling in his chest just surged into this terrifying, deafening roar. The glow from the metal shell got dramatically brighter.
And then the object delivered the physical strike that would come to define this whole case.
A blast of intensely hot gas or energy erupted from a very precise, rectangular, grid-like vent on the craft's surface.
And it hit him directly in the chest and abdomen.
Yeah, and the sources all emphasized the precision of this. It wasn't just a general wave of heat. It was focused.
The force must have been incredible.
It was. His work shirt ignited instantly. He screamed. Just this guttural reaction to the immediate scorching pain, and he collapsed. He started rolling on the granite, instinctively trying to put out the flames.
And the pain was just absolute. Plus the concussion from the blast itself. He was disoriented, struggling to breathe.
And while he's on the ground, the object above him just completes its mission. It lifts smoothly, effortlessly, no debris, no drama. It was briefly joined high up by that second craft.
And then they were gone.
Both accelerated away and vanished silently. The forest was plunged back into that ancient quiet, leaving Michalak alone, in agony, with the smells of ozone and sulfur and his own burned clothing hanging in the air.
Left there, scorched and shaking. But when he finally, somehow, managed to get to his feet and look at the damage, he saw the proof.
Undeniable, shocking physical evidence. The pattern of the injury was exact. The burns on his chest and abdomen formed a precise geometric pattern that perfectly matched that grid-like vent he'd seen on the craft.
And this is the central, objective piece of evidence that makes this case so persistent.
It is. We're not talking about a general scorch mark. Not at all.
How specific are we talking?
Incredibly specific. The injury was a series of parallel lines of severe, blistering burns across his torso. But the crucial detail, the thing that baffled the doctors, was the skin between those burn lines.
It was untouched.
Relatively untouched. Creating this pattern that looked for all the world like a stamp or a hot grill had been pressed right onto his body.
That just violates the physics of a normal burn, doesn't it? I mean, if you get hit by hot gas, the heat spreads out.
It diffuses, exactly. The entire area should have been burned. The fact that the energy was so highly focused, so contained to those precise lines, suggests a delivery system operating with extreme collimated precision. A focused energy discharge, delivered only through those specific openings.
So this physical signature, etched right into his skin, turned this from a strange story into a documented incident. An injury caused by a mechanism nobody could explain.
And gathering his scorched belongings, Stefan Michalak began the long, staggering walk back to civilization, knowing he was carrying physical proof of an impossible interaction.
And the ordeal was far from over. I mean, the walk back itself must have been terrible.
It was. The initial shock wore off and was replaced by this systemic illness. He was severely disoriented, he was weak, dizzy.
And the pain from the burns was immense, but it was the internal symptoms that became more and more alarming.
He had this overwhelming nausea. He kept getting sick, and he noted this bitter, distinct metallic taste in his mouth that just would not go away. His body was reacting like it had been poisoned or subjected to some unseen systemic attack.
So when he finally gets back to his family,
they were horrified. You can imagine the burned clothes, his confusion, and then these bizarre grid-shaped blisters on his chest. They took him for medical help immediately, and eventually he ended up with specialists in Winnipeg.
And once the doctor saw him, the confusion just got deeper. They were dealing with injuries they couldn't classify.
Right. They went through the checklist, ruling things out. They confirmed the burns were severe, 3rd degree in some places, but they couldn't figure out the cause.
Not a typical flame burn.
No, those are diffuse and irregular. These weren't chemical burns either, which leave specific residues. And they definitely weren't typical electrical shock injuries.
It was the geometric precision of that grid pattern that just, it defied all medical explanation for an injury.
The doctors had to question him over and over. What machinery were you near? What chemicals? And when he kept insisting on his story, a seamless craft, a grid vent, they had no framework for it. It was a dead end.
And then his overall health started to decline.
Rapidly. It suggested a profound internal trauma. He lost a lot of weight very quickly, over 20 pounds in a short time. The chronic nausea, the vomiting, these debilitating headaches, they just persisted. He couldn't sleep. And he always had that unrelenting metallic taste.
To anyone who knows the symptoms, that immediately sounds like exposure to some kind of high energy source, like radiation.
That was the immediate medical concern, yes. The specialists ordered tests to try and figure it out, but you have to remember, this is 1967. Radiation testing was not as precise as it is today, especially in a regular hospital. They were likely looking for a lowered white blood cell count, which is a classic indicator.
But the results were inconclusive.
Inconclusive in a really perplexing way. They couldn't confirm a massive lethal dose of acute radiation poisoning, but at the same time, the symptoms, the systemic collapse, the weight loss, that taste, were all powerfully suggestive that he'd been exposed to something energetic that had penetrated deep into his systems.
Well, they were stuck.
Completely stuck. You have a physical injury that looks like it was stenciled onto his skin with extreme heat, combined with an internal illness that looks like radiation sickness, but you don't have the definitive lab markers for it. No single diagnosis could explain both the precise external trauma and the prolonged internal distress.
All they could do was treat the symptoms.
Right. They had to conclude that whatever happened to him was genuinely novel and just beyond their ability to classify.
Because the injury was so severe and the medical reports were so baffling, this obviously got official attention very quickly.
It immediately drew the attention of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the RCMP. They opened a formal investigation. The physical evidence, the burns, the clothing, the medical files, it demanded an official inquiry.
And Mikulak's credibility was front and center.
It was paramount. The investigators noted his account was incredibly consistent through multiple interrogations, medical exams. He never wavered. He stayed calm. He focused on the facts. 2 objects, 1 landed, a hatch, voices, and then a precise blast of heat.
And that consistency gave weight to a story that otherwise would be very hard to believe.
It did. So the investigation moved to the physical location. The RCMP sent teams out to that remote, rocky outcrop.
And they found evidence there.
They confirmed physical damage consistent with his claims. They found areas of scorched granite where the craft reportedly rested. They documented patches of melted lichen, and lichen is tough stuff. It takes intense, localized heat to melt it like that. So they took photos, collected samples, and confirmed that something powerful, generating immense heat, had been in that clearing very recently.
Which completely rules out a hallucination.
Immediately. But the investigation got complicated right away because of what they didn't find.
A significant absence.
A huge one. This massive object generates all this heat, lands, and takes off, and yet there was no debris, no wreckage, no metallic fragments, no spilled fuel, not a single trace of what the craft was made of. It left a powerful signature on the land and on the man, but nothing of itself.
Which makes it impossible for the RCMP to classify it as a normal crash or accident.
Exactly. So this had to be kicked up to a higher level. The Department of National Defense, the DND, got involved. They checked all flight logs, air traffic control records for that time. They needed to see if any known aircraft, classified, foreign, military, experimental, matched his description.
Yeah.
The conclusion was clear. Nothing. No known aircraft, domestic or foreign, matched that seamless, cigar-shaped object or its incredible performance, the silent descent, the intense heat, the instant acceleration. If it was human technology, it was completely outside of any known operational inventory.
So you have a credible witness, a documented medical injury, and confirmed site damage.
Mm-hmm.
The D&D and the RCMP had to start dismantling every other possible theory.
Systematically. They looked hard at the hoax theory.
But there was no motive.
None. He was a private, successful man. He wasn't looking for fame. The injuries were real. They were debilitating. They required weeks of treatment. And to fake such a precise geometric burn pattern would require incredible equipment and, well, self-inflicted agony in a remote location. It just didn't hold up.
Okay, what about an industrial accident? Maybe some old explosives or chemicals left out there.
That fails on 2 counts. The location was miles from any industrial activity. And more importantly, no known chemical or piece of equipment produces that unique surgical grid pattern of burns. Burns from chemicals or explosives are messy, they're diffuse. This was like a stamp.
Which leads to hallucination or some kind of psychological event.
And that's the easiest one to dismiss because the evidence was physical, objective. Hallucinations don't scorch ancient granite, they don't melt lichen, and they certainly don't cause medically documented precise grid burns through your clothes that are followed by weeks of systemic illness. The physical evidence just flatly refutes any psychological explanation.
As a case file just gets thicker and thicker, it becomes one of the most substantial documents of its kind in Canada.
And despite all the rigorous investigation, the site visits, the medical files checking every flight record, the authorities could not resolve it. It settled into the most uncomfortable category for any official agency. Unexplained.
Not a proven alien craft.
but not a proven hoax and not a proven accident. Every conventional explanation just fell short of explaining all the evidence. The facts refused to fit the established world, and the investigation, officially, was left open.
And the failure of that investigation to find an answer meant that Stefan Michalak was left to live with the consequences for the rest of his life.
Yeah, while he got through the worst of the illness, his health never fully recovered. He suffered from chronic fatigue, persistent headaches, and just the immense psychological burden of having interacted with something unclassifiable.
And he carried the physical evidence.
Always. Those permanent grid scars on his torso were his receipt, the irrefutable, undeniable proof of what happened out there. And that's why the Falcon Lake case has endured for decades. It's a cornerstone case for researchers all over the world.
Let's just summarize what makes this case stand out so much. First, you have a single witness whose background.
As an industrial mechanic, a careful prospector,
Yeah.
it lends him this immense inherent credibility. He's not a person prone to fantasy.
Second, you have the undeniable documented physical injury. The severe burns, confirmed by doctors, arranged in that unique geometric grid pattern.
A pattern they couldn't explain the mechanism for.
And third, the extensive official investigation. The RCMP, the DND, their thoroughness, the site documentation of the altered granite, the tests, all of it leading to this institutional acknowledgement that something profound and unknown did happen there.
And what's also so critical for its legacy is Michalak's restraint. He never tried to sensationalize the story. He never went on TV insisting it was extraterrestrials. He just reported the facts of what happened over and over, consistently, until the day he died. And that restraint just solidifies the power of the evidence he carried on his body.
I want to go back to that grid pattern, because that really is the hardest piece of evidence for anyone to dismiss. Modern experts, engineers, physicists, they still look at this case. What do they conclude about the physics needed to create those burns?
Well, it suggests an energy delivery system that's almost surgical. For those narrow strips of skin between the burn lines to be untouched, the energy, whether it was intense heat or microwaves or some kind of pulsed plasma, it had to be highly collimated.
Meaning focused.
Extremely focused. Directed specifically through the little holes in that grid vent, and then it had to dissipate almost instantly on impact instead of spreading out thermally like a normal burn would.
Because if it was just a hot piece of metal pressed against him,
the residual heat would have scarred the whole area. You'd have second-degree burns everywhere, at least. The fact that the damage is so linear, sparing the skin in between, implies a focused, non-diffusive energy delivery, that is. Well, it's still beyond our common explanations.
And think about the environment. The energy was strong enough to ignite his shirt and severely burn his flesh. But the RCMP found no evidence of a forest fire.
Right. The energy was destructive only at that precise point of impact. It shows an incredible level of thermal containment, a targeted, brief application of extreme energy.
The cultural weight of this story really comes from its ability to challenge our reality, doesn't it? It's that painful collision where all our institutions for making sense of the world, science, medicine, government, they all failed to give a clean answer.
Michalak brought back something that was measurable, documented, and visible, yet it was utterly unclassifiable by the standards of his time, and you could argue even by ours.
A grounded man who had a completely ungrounded experience.
And he carried the proof of that paradox with him for the rest of his life. The case just forces you to confront the idea that sometimes the unknown leaves an extremely clear, measurable, tangible signature behind, something that physically interacted with, burned, and altered a human life.
So we've gone through the whole scope of the Falcon Lake encounter. We have the credible witness, the methodical object, the baffling details, and the catastrophic precise injuries that followed. The central contradiction is still this profound mystery. A grounded man's testimony, backed by physical proof that government agencies were completely unable to classify or dismiss.
And when you have an event that's investigated that thoroughly by official bodies, the RCMP, the DND, medical specialists, and they still have to conclude that they just don't know, that lingering doubt becomes the most unsettling outcome. It's powerful circumstantial evidence that there are physical processes, or maybe technologies, operating outside of our known scientific parameters.
And here's the final thought we want to leave you with today. Consider the object's dual nature. What kind of engineering allows a seamless craft to deliver a permanent, precise physical mark on a person's body, that perfect grid signature, while at the same time it has the technology to lift off, accelerate away silently, leaving virtually no trace of its own material, no debris on the ground?
The fact that the unknown reached back and left a scar that persists to this very day ensures the story of Falcon Lake will always demand an answer. It's a powerful testament to how a story's credibility is permanently cemented when the evidence is written not in ink, but etched onto the skin.
We encourage you to continue exploring the official documentation of this historic encounter. Thank you for joining us for this analysis.